and Prejudice, adapted by Wendy Mockey and Lewis Treston. Woo! Before we begin tonight, I'd like to honour the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, the Turrbal and Yagara people. On behalf of all the creatives on this stage this evening, we acknowledge that this space, this place, has always been a site of storytelling. For those who don't know me, my name is Dan Evans. I'm the co-director of Pride and Prejudice, and I'm also the artistic director of Queensland Theatre. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to season 2025 and to the first play briefing of the year. For those of you who are long-standing VIPs of our company, welcome back. And for those of you who are here for the first time, we extend an extra special salutation. You are joining the ranks of a very cool club, one that gets all the behind-the-scenes secrets, some plot spoilers, and some juicy creative insights ahead of the production's debut preview performance. These briefings are all about illuminating parts of the artistic process, casting, programming, rehearsal, design, that would otherwise remain invisible when you sit in your seat to enjoy the show being magicked by our teams of brilliant creatives like this one. So tonight there will be questions, there will be answers, and there will be the return of the Lucky Door Prize, everyone's favourite. In 2025, the 250th anniversary of her birth, we honour the rom-com's mother and master, Jane Austen. This literary trailblazer was a woman of fierce intellect, wit and imagination. While never lauded in her lifetime, Austen's work has been translated into over 40 languages. In fact, Pride and Prejudice has never been out of print, and at last count had sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Now, while things may look a little different back in 1811, those empire lines and bonnets for starters, there are some striking similarities to today. Gender is still imbalanced, marriage remains aspirational, and authentic connection is hard won. But there is still romance that never gets old, right? Replete with wistful looks, awkward first impressions, occasional high angst, a spot of loathing, and spoiler alert, a happy ending. Filled with zinging one-liners, plenty of swoon and iconic characters, would you please welcome the cast and creative team behind Pride and Prejudice? They are co-director Bridget Boyle, as Elizabeth Bennet, Madison Burridge, Jane Bennett, Perry Mooney, Lydia Bennett, Courtney Cavallero, Kitty Bennett, Daphne Chen, Mary Bennett, Mrs. Gardner, Mrs. Hurst, Shanoa Jamal, Charlotte and Miss Bingley, Amy Ingram, Mrs. Bennett and Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Gail Ballantyne, Mr. Darcy, Andrew Hurl, Mr. Bingley, William Castledine, Mr. Collins, Cameron Hurry, Mr. Bennett, Brian Probitz, Wickham, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Mr. Gardner, Jeremiah Ray, Janaki Gerard, one of our covers, Stephen Hurst, one of our covers, co-adapter Lewis Treston, choreographer and movement director Nerida Matei, designer Christina Smith, sound designer and composer Guy Webster, and our lighting designer and professional mime artist Jason Glenwright. Do you want to... Here, wait, Jace, come sit here. Oh no, there's a chair coming. And our production manager, Dan Madison. I'm going to start by asking some questions. Oh my gosh, Jason, that's so precarious. And then I'll open up the floor for any questions you might have out there. So get those brains firing. Bridget, Jane Austen, you are, when I pitched this project to you, you almost fell off your chair with excitement. You have been a purist, a fan of Jane Austen for so long. When did this lifelong love affair start? And can you tell us about your first time ever reading Pride and Prejudice?
Well, Dan, I was about 14 years old, I think, and when I first read it, I think it was handed to me maybe by a grandmother or a loved auntie, I can't remember, and I was so immersed in the world and so convinced that Lizzie and Darcy would never, spoiler alert, Lizzie and Darcy get together. I was so convinced that they wouldn't, and when the plot's twists and turns happened, and they actually did, I was so immersed in the world that it took me on an incredible journey, and I come back to. I probably read it once a year nerd alert. And I find joy and new things every single time I read it. And the process of making this show has actually opened up new things for me, which I never thought I could do. I've read it so many times, but I've found brilliant new interpretations from this incredible group of cast and creatives, and new things and new fabulous moments in the book. So, yeah.
Can I ask you, what is your favourite moment in the book?
It's the moment where he says, "Dearest, loveliest Elizabeth." I'm a sucker. I'm such a romantic, and that's my favourite.
Beautiful, amazing. I'm going to go to Lewis Treston, our co-adapter, who shares that role with Wendy Mockey, who couldn't be here tonight, and sends her apologies. What was the challenge, do you think, or what was the biggest challenge of adapting Pride and Prejudice? And what, second part of that question, what do you think makes this adaptation, your adaptation, unique?
The first part of that answer is really pretty boring, and on one of which it's so long. But the thing is, it's a masterpiece. So once you start taking bits and pieces out, the whole beautiful creation begins to fall apart. So on one level, the hardest thing about it is condensing, 400 excellent pages into 2 hours of theatre. So that was actually probably the hardest thing. But what makes our adaptation quite unique, I think, is the way that we sort of try and balance fidelity to the original, but then also kind of having enough of a contemporary awareness and creating inflections on sort of moments that speak to the current moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Amazing. As you can see, this is a really large cast. This is 12 amazing performers, 2 covers, and they are led by the fearless and amazing Madison Burridge as Elizabeth Bennet. Maddie was with us in Gaslight this time last year as the cover of one of our principal performers, and this year exits the understudy world into leading a production. So welcome, Maddie. Elizabeth Bennet is a bit of a Hamlet role. It's pretty amazing, and I think me and Bridget counted. We think you leave the stage for maybe you don't leave the stage, like 20 seconds in one transition. I guess I'd love to know, what does it take to prepare for a performance like this? And can you let us into any of your pre-performance rituals that you might do?
Absolutely. I think it is terrifying looking down an iconic role that everyone will sort of come with their own expectations of who Elizabeth is. And I think the biggest thing for me to remember backstage before coming on is probably loyalty to my strengths and loyalty to this world, because this Elizabeth that you will see in this show has to fit this world and has to fit me. So reminding myself to have fun backstage, I think she is this beautiful balance of someone who is within the world but also is able to step outside of it and observe it, and has a few lovely moments with the audience of looking and commenting on the world that she's in. So being present and actually just having fun. We just dance a lot in the dressing rooms. It's nice not to have to come on in a really emotional state. That comes later.
Amazing. Mr. Hurl, Andrew Hurl in the centre there. We know Mr. Darcy as the ultimate romantic hero, but what's your take on him after preparing this character for quite a while? Perhaps
I try to live
preparation?
up to that one, but we'll see.
Why do you think people find him so endearing?
Yeah, he's an interesting character. It's been a lovely journey of discovery, because yes, he is called some bad names all throughout, but it's been great to explore what is quite close to me and what is different and what we can push and pull. But it's been lovely. I keep saying to people, one of the great things about this play is just, we've talked about the iceberg melting. He goes on this wonderful journey through the play, and that is such an enjoyable thing as an actor, to go from a very hard exterior to a really beautiful, soft and vulnerable space, which hopefully everyone will get to see and enjoy. So yeah, it's been lovely, and just working with this amazing cast. You don't feel, especially working with Maddie, you don't feel like you have to do too much, because you're getting a lot of things. Sometimes anger, sometimes love, sometimes you just sort of react to the beautiful things you're getting. So yeah, it's been great.
Awesome. I might come to Brian and Gail. You are the matriarch and the patriarch of this world. How have you taken cues from the characters that you play in the book and made them your own? Were there any clues or things that you really wanted to hold tight to? Anything that surprised you as you prepared these iconic roles?
Yes, very much so from the book. I think Mrs. Bennet is very clearly written, and I try to honour her. She tries her best. There are some wonderful adjectives that I use to describe her, so I try to make sure they're in there somewhere whilst still having the world, as Maddie said, this world, which is Austen, but it's these wonderful creatives, what they've brought to it. So keeping honest, keeping her connected, and keeping her objectives very clear, because they are very clear.
And how do you play two, I don't know, they're diametrically opposed, but Lady Catherine de Bourgh and Mrs. Bennet, how do you separate them in your mind? Like, how do you, before you come on stage, is there anything you have to do to kind of go, right, how do I gear shift into this other person? Because some of the costume changes for you are microseconds.
So fast, absolutely, and I've chosen her face and her connection. When I say flipping from Mrs. Bennet, who's flighty and up and not as connected, that Catherine, I need to bring her right down, anchor her, and I tend to put her face is more distorted, whereas Bennet's up and life, give it to me, give it to me. Catherine's like, I've got enough, back off.
I love it. What about you, Brian? How's it been in this world? And Mr. Bennet is so iconic, and I don't want to freak you out or anything, but what? But maybe I will. What is your take? How have you? He's kind of unfurled himself to you, I think, in rehearsal. If I don't want to speak too much on your behalf. But.
Yes, he's what I've tried to do and honour. What's very present in the book is the fact that he's very much an anchor point. He's a realist. He's not in it for material gain in a weird way. There's more depth in him that he sees in some of his daughters, perhaps not all of them. That's yet. So that's something I've tried to tap into. How do you tap into this person who's very Zen-like, but still giving them a bit of a journey? And I think in this interpretation, he goes on a little bit more of a journey than what is present in the book, which is great for you as an actor to have that little bit of growth in the character. So they actually start at one place and then end somewhere else, and hopefully they've learnt something along the way. But I've really enjoyed just tapping into that Zen-like quality, but also the fact that he likes to poke the bear, as we discovered. He likes just to kind of have a bit of fun with those around him. And working out why he does that, that's been my challenge. Yeah.
I love that. Do you want to speak a bit, Brian, because it's really special. How does Mr. Bennet's relationship to Lizzie perhaps differ from the other sisters? What have you and Maddie found? Maybe I'm not sure if Maddie, you want to add to that.
I think he sees something in himself, in her. I think that he relates to, and he can respect the fact that she doesn't seem to be on the front foot with, yes, I'll marry every person that comes in my sight. They share a common thread, and it perhaps goes both ways as well. He learns from her just as much as I think she has probably learnt from him. So there's a good connective point, which audibly in the play we don't have many moments, but we might share one or two jokes together that I've really tried to kind of get that rapport very, very clear, often with no words. So I think, and with Jane as well, he sees, I guess it could be a maturity thing as well. He sees a certain maturity in them, that they're world-wise and they're not rushing in to marry for the wrong reason, I think.
Fab, Maddie, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think, in a lot of the domestic scenes, the moments that we have together are sort of, as Brian put it, poking the bear. And I think that they do find a common connection between each other, and it could be a comment on both of them being quite zen in the world, but then also the younger generation moving up and saying, but what about these things that still exist? And asking those questions, which I think is pretty pivotal for the father-daughter relationship in our particular version, where she asks him some pretty tough questions that he hasn't thought of yet.
You're probably getting a sense that this play is a bit of a mashup. So it resounds with Austen, but it definitely has a kind of contemporary femme politic. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would, Daniel.
Brilliant. I want to turn my attention now to the amazing Bennett sisters, Perry, Courtney, Daff, Shanoa. Do you want to talk about how you fit into the Bennett family dynamic? Who are these creatures?
So, elder sister.
Well, Jane and I are both eldest of our families, so I connect with her a lot in that way, in that sense that, you know, I'm used to helping run a household. I'm used to being the point of call for the adults. I'm used to sort of, you know, rallying up my younger siblings and things like that. So I think she sits very firmly at the top for most of the play, most of the story, and she tries to take it in her stride as much as she can. She's the kind of person that leads with her heart, and I think she cares so deeply for her family and for her parents, and I think that can sometimes be to her detriment. So yeah, I think like I share a lot of similarities with her, but she is the nicest, best version, most unproblematic version of me that could like literally ever exist. So yeah. I'm done.
Well, I'm also an elder sibling, so it's been a real stretch for me acting-wise to play the youngest. It's really challenging. I don't know, so I play Lydia Bennett. What to say about her? I think we spoke about how in the book she's described as having high animal spirits. And so when in doubt, I distill to high animal spirits. And I think that's her most endearing quality, and also, as those who are familiar with the work know, that's also ultimately to her detriment in the tale. And in our rehearsal room, there's been a push-pull of me trying to honour the story in the sense of that she is described as the silliest girl by her dad, by many people in the family, the most fool-headed girl. But also honour that she's a woman, like she's a young girl who wants things, and that's where that can come from, and that can also seem silly because that wasn't really allowed. And those high animal spirits are kind of like her biggest motivator and her biggest flaw, I suppose. Yeah.
Hi, I play Kitty Bennett. So she's the second youngest, but I feel like in this dynamic, she definitely feels like the youngest. She's always clung on to Lydia and her, and they're always around together. But how she relates to me, it's really different because I haven't grown up with any siblings at all, so this has been so nice to have little sisters. But yeah, it's a chaotic, and I feel like Lydia and Kitty are the chaos in the family, and I've really enjoyed bringing that. But also, you know, Kitty is described in the book as ill timing, you know, annoying, and there are parts, you know, yeah, the words do play onto that. But I'd love in this version that I play Kitty that there's reasons why she does what she does, and there's want of respect in the family and love for herself, and that's probably why she clings on to Lydia, because she's like, she knows what she wants. But yeah, I feel like her detriment would be like she wants to do everything for everyone, and that's also a positive and a strength, but also what causes her the most pain at times as well. And so I really feel for her. I love her. She holds a place in my heart. Yeah.
I play Mary, the middle sister. She's directly in the middle of everyone. So she kind of is a little bit out of the loop. I think Jane and Lizzie have their friendship as the two eldest, and Lydia and Kitty have their friendship. And Mary's kind of just left in the middle. And but we spoke a lot about, in rehearsals, about Mary being the only character in the show. I don't know if this is a bit too revealing, but she's the only character in the show really that feels like she lives in the 21st century. And so she kind of is sort of out of the whole dynamic of the play a little bit too. So I guess she's the character that that Lewis and Wendy have kind of offered all of that. Sorry, I've been sick, and so my I'm losing my train of thought a little bit. So she does bring the contemporary lens. Thank you, Amy, very much.
I think that's the quality when me and Wendy were in the room together a lot, that because Mary in the original is such a sort of pious outsider and she's sort of humorless, which is funny in its own way, but then in the room, it's just that creative kismet thing that happens, that we just started inventing this other version who's still an outsider, so it's still faithful in a lot of ways, but it's actually the fact that that character is a bit ahead of the times, and then the audience is led in to that because you also live in the 21st century, so you sort of know.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm going to bounce around a bit in a second, but I just wanted to ask, Cameron, you play the iconic Mr. Collins. Oh, so there you go. You heard him out there. How do you? But you also are Pride and Prejudice purist, aren't you? Do you want to talk about how you found your own stamp on Mr. Collins? How did you put your own stamp on this iconic character?
Because I'm not a huge reader of books, so I've only read Pride and Prejudice like once, years and years ago, but the mini-series and the Keira Knightley movie, like brilliant interpretations of Mr. Collins that I love. And when I was auditioning for this, I was just like, I don't want to do what they did. I wanted to be true to how he is in the novel, but, you know, we were encouraged to find our own stamp on these characters, and I was rehearsing it by myself, and suddenly it just felt like the Queen giving a speech, and very, very and I said, he is that character. He's very, I go to university, right? Okay. And then I'm a clergyman, and then Lady Catherine, you need to get married. Okay, I need to get married, right? It's just this, very living life by rote sort of thing, and he's probably one of the most accurate, I guess, in portrayals of men back then, because there are a lot of men, even today actually, that have no intelligence, no education, and they go very, very far in life. And he's probably the only male character that, apart from Wickham, who doesn't really care, but Collins doesn't really. Collins doesn't really address his flaws like Darcy does. Like he almost gets challenged, but he's just one of those characters that just continues on in his way of life, and it's actually quite sad.
It's beautiful. It's very funny. And speaking of, there is a term in the theatre called corpsing, and that's where you sort of die on stage, really from laughing. And there is a scene with Mr. Collins at dinner, which I don't think anyone has made it through yet without some having to turn up stage slowly and just laugh into one's shoulder. It's been a very fun-filled rehearsal process, and I'm wondering, Will, do you mind telling us what has been what are your most favourite?
Just because I always laugh, Daniel.
Well, you do break character a bit, but what is your funniest? What's been the funnest part or the most hilarious part of this rehearsal process, do you think?
I'm taking my time because there are so many. There is a scene where Elizabeth comes to see Jane at Netherfield because Jane falls ill. And it's a scene set in Netherfield, and my goodness, I really shouldn't have offered the blocking to be downstage and looking out to the audience, because the looks that Amy and Shanoa do throughout the whole scene bring me to tears, and I can't turn away from the audience. So I am constantly trying to find new ways laughing in front of you. But I think that's been one of the funniest, but also the dancing has been so incredibly fun. I'm sure more people will speak to that later on, but every morning at rehearsals, 9 a.m., we check in, 9:15, then we start dancing. There's no funny business. We're on there, and it's no funny business. And that physical approach to the work has been really, really good, because getting it out of the way first thing in the morning puts us into the world that we are living in throughout the rest of the day. And then we get to find those contemporary flares physically. And then later, we get to find them in the acting. So to me, that's been a huge, huge amount of fun.
Amazing. There is a lot of dancing in this, as you might expect. There's a lot of assemblies, a lot of balls. There's some weddings and some surprise dances. And they've all spun out of the magical mind of Nerida Matei, who's our choreographer and movement director. Neri, do you want to talk about, you're no stranger to Queensland theatre audiences. You are the amazing movement director on Boys Swallows Universe, and it's a pleasure to have you back in the building and in this team creating with us. How did you respond when this brief landed across your desk? We went, we want Regency, but we kind of want contemporary, and we don't want it to be all Regency dancing. We want it to feel a bit like the club. How did you go about marrying our brief?
Well, I think my first response was, yes, you do need those things, really. I mean, I think for me, my process always is to dive as deep as I can and be the biggest nerd I can about choreography. So to go, yes, Regency dance, which for that period, there's so many incredible dance sequences already, a lot of formations, which are really interesting to play with. So it was about learning as much as I could about Regency dance from that specific period. And there are some dances that are mentioned in the books. There are some dances that have become quite controversial, because why would you put that in Bridgerton? Because Jane Austen hates that dance. So I learned a lot about all of those things. And then kind of fuse that with contemporary choreographic practice, and then again fuse that with popular culture. And then the next level is kind of what is the juiciest part of the narrative and story that we can then help enhance through all of that. So it's quite kind of like multi-layered. And it has been really fun. I agree, Will. Thank you. Yeah.
That leads me to Guy, the music in this work that Neri's been working with, and you two have been sort of working together to broker this. Do you want to speak to what is the musical sound of this Pride and Prejudice? What might we hear?
Yeah, the music in our version of this story is speaks very much to the romance of the story, but also really to the joy in the life of the story, the joy in the lives of the characters. They really strive for joy. There's a lot of that in the piece. When we first talked about what the music would be, we spoke immediately about contemporary songs and contemporary pieces, but we spoke about the idea of making them with string quartet, kind of a la Bridgerton, in the way that they use in the TV series some contemporary songs performed by string quartets. So there's a lot of that in the show, but we kind of took it quite a bit further. So, yeah, I worked with a local string quartet, beautiful bunch of musicians to record the string quartet for the show, and then I kind of amplified it with a lot of synth bass and very large beats. So it gets very contemporary, but still maintains a real flavour of that orchestral language, that sonic language that really sits in the Regency era where this story lives.
Amazing. This beautiful world that you can see before you has been designed by the incredible designer, Christina Smith, who's sitting over there, who was last with us on this stage in Viet Gone, and again has given us this beautiful, beautiful romantic setting. Christina, why are we sitting on a timber deck in a beautiful English garden?
Well, when we were working on the design, we were actually really adamant that it would be from Elizabeth's point of view. And actually it was quite an unusual process because the design probably started the same time as the adaptation. I feel like we went in there and got briefed together and went, oh, okay. And so in a sense, sort of having that shared approach, I think, is something that's been a really lovely thing. So that idea of Elizabeth World has developed with the text. And really, I think it's her kind of love of nature, of walking, and also love of words. So the idea of the garden is a sort of, I guess, a rambling countryside. It's the container for the space. And I think my first offer to Bridget and Dan was a stage, actually quite a bare stage in the middle, but it sort of morphed a little bit into the idea of a book, something that actually opens up. So I'm going to give you a spoiler, you actually never see this configuration. We did this for tonight so you didn't see what was beyond it. So you must have walked in and thought, oh, we're seeing the whole set. No. This is not a set. But the idea is that it will, as Elizabeth's world opens up, as possibilities for her open up, or opportunities, or even travel, this world, this comforting world, actually is able to open up and reveal, possible futures.
Beautiful. Little Easter egg for everyone. If you look up to that top deck there, you'll see some engraving. Christina, do you want to tell us, what does that engraving mean? For those who are coming along, wink, wink.
Well, it's very subtle, Dan.
It is, isn't it?
It's probably more subtle than it was originally, but it's sort of worked out that way. There's a little engraving on this wood. This is a very, as people will attest to, it is wood. It's quite often we scenic paint it, but it is rough sawn wood. And what we've routed into it, we got quite obsessed in the process with the journeys that were undertaken and actually a map of England or southern England. So I guess it sort of adds a little bit of context to where we are, maybe a little bit of texture, but there is a little, if you can make out actually some of the shires that we sort of travel through, I think you'll be too entertained to actually sit there and think about that, probably.
Brilliant. Great. We took this show up to the beautiful Empire Theatre in Toowoomba. So it's actually, we had a bit of an out-of-town tryout, and we were listening to audience reactions there, and we've come back and we're playing with some changes, some modifications. Jason Glenwright, our lighting designer, how is the version that if audiences are seeing it in Toowoomba and Brisbane, how might it be changing in terms of lighting? What did you learn about the set when you were up there, and how are you changing things up in Bris Vegas?
Good question. I think one of the things that, as a lighting designer, I have to achieve in the restaging of it in Brisbane is to keep it as true as it was to Toowoomba, because what we did up there was the show up there, and it gave us a lot of clues, and it gave us the look of the show. But one of the most amazing things about doing it too is you can look at what you did in Toowoomba and go, that was good, but what if I did it like this instead? Or what if I look at this thing that didn't work as well and pivot the design a little bit like that? So it's one of those, it's like a second chance. It's you don't really get that when you get to put on a show once. You do it and then it's done. But when you get the opportunity to do it a week later, you can immediately evaluate the work that you've created as a group and go, what works well, and what could we tighten up a little bit more? And that could be, the hardest thing about being an artist is where's the line? Where do you stop? And that's the journey this week. Hopefully we come to a good place where we've taken it to the stage that we feel like it actually takes it to the next level. So let's see how this next week goes.
Brilliant. We are the Queensland Theatre Company, so we were really, really excited to premiere this work in Toowoomba. We all went on what felt like drama camp for about a week and a bit, staying up up on the range. We played to over 2,000 people with this version of the show, and we learnt quite a bit. But we also learnt that Austen fans and audiences have their favourites, but they also they have people who they love to hate. Jeremiah Ray, do you want to tell us a bit about how Wickham was received up in Toowoomba? What was the delight of discovering your character in front of over 1,000 people?
That's a good question. Wickham's a weird case in that I think the goal is to try and achieve whatever kind of quality that Mr. Darcy doesn't have at the start, which is social skills. And having that in a red coat and trying to smear as much charm onto him is great. But the interesting thing of performing in front of 2,000 people who, for the most part, are huge fans and they know every little twist and turn. Any kind of moment that Wickham has a bit of charm or heart or anything, you can just hear a groan through the audience of just, oh, you piece of work. Oh, you, stay away from that boy. So no, that's great. And if anything, it's a testament to how great of a time it is to pull this work out, because there are so many people just wanting to see the embodiment of these characters and wanting to just project every bit of feeling onto all of them and just go, cut that boy out. But what are you talking about? It's a red coat. It's dashing.
Amy, what did you learn from Toowoomba, from playing to that audience as Miss Bingley and Charlotte?
Well, people love to hate Caroline Bingley, and I love to play it. I don't know, there's such a joy in playing like the villain, and Caroline Bingley is such a biatch. So it's a real good time. But I think it was a nice reminder how much people have already imprinted onto these characters and their expectations of them and who they are. And so the first, because we did the show twice in one day, the first show was very much like, oh, okay. And the second show was like, all right, here we go. So it was kind of fun to feel that out and really just feel the wave of hatred come at you from the audience. So C is there. But Charlotte's lovely, but they're kind of like the opposite of the same coin. You know, they're both always the bridesmaid, actually. But one just has more money. So she can just buy her dreams later. But yeah.
Amazing. You and Shanoa, I think, share some of the fastest costume changes in this work. I think the fastest one is is it 6 seconds or 8 seconds? Or what is that change from scene 2 to 2? It's in the same scene.
I've never asked how long because
it's best not to know.
That would apply too much pressure.
Copy.
You've got 6 seconds. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You've got all the time in the world, Shanoa. It's totally fine.
It's one of those things where if you take a second to second guess yourself, you're behind. Yeah. So you go, whip, and you're already done. You're screwed because you've gone, and then, so it's just, you just get it in your body and you go, go, go.
It's just about trusting our helpers who are there. Yeah. They know what they're doing. They know what character they're setting up for. And so I just trust them. And I'm like, what is this? Okay, yes.
What is great that you don't see is us backstage swearing and hoping that our microphones aren't still on. And getting used to the costumes, because our costumes are huge. Yes. And then there's moments where we're climbing up the stairs, and if you heard the microphone, you'd hear fuck, like clomping up, trying, and then elegance. So it's a real adventure.
Literally
backstage.
saying elegance.
Yeah.
It's like the Indy 500 back there. It's like, put on the pit stop. It's amazing. Okay, cool. Into this room about a week and a half ago arrived our two amazing covers, Janaki and Stephen. You arrived to 8 dance sequences, a number of dialects. There's 10. There's 10 dance sequences, a number of dialects. There is 25 costume changes between the characters you're portraying. You are understudying all the male roles, Stephen, and you're doing all the female roles, Janaki. Yeah. How does that make you feel, I guess? What goes through your head?
Obviously, when you're offered to cover all the male tracks in a great show like this, you approach it with some trepidation. But it's been a great couple of weeks, I feel. The work that we get to watch every day is fantastic and very inspiring, and it's a wonderful testament to all the actors here who have worked very hard, and the creatives to create and write and make this amazing show. I think you're going to be incredibly impressed. But yeah, it does definitely put a little little bit of stress on whether or not we might get the call up on a day. It depends, obviously, how much preparation we might have. It might be. That was one of the femmes coughing, right? That's
Look, I've already walked on stage twice during tech, so. No. I touch wood, literally. One thing that I've learned, because this is my first time doing offstage covering, is our job is we are the support system to support the ship. We're here to support the cast and support this show going on so the wonderful audience gets to see and enjoy this work. And so it's really been humbling, in a sense, to be like, this isn't about me and what I do with this role. It's about supporting this beautiful team and the story and the work that they have created thus far. So I approach it daily from a place of play and gentleness, and that's how I intend to get through this season.
But if one of us goes on, the other one will be backstage in between scenes, just being like, okay, you're off. Okay, next up, I think you're over here.
We've made a vow to each other.
We'll have a big,
we're like support systems backstage. That's what's going to happen.
Many diagrams.
So many diagrams.
So brilliant. We're going to come out to you, audience. Do you have any questions? Lewis and Wendy, how did they adapt something that is a book into a play? And did you look at any other adaptations, etc.?
It's sort of like a yes to all, because the BBC series and the Joe Wright film are sort of imprinted on my brain since childhood. So, and then the kind of novel came after the fact. But also every play, you sort of have to figure out how to write it. And it was a very collaborative project with Saffron, who wasn't here, and Bridget and Dan. For me, what I wanted to do from the outset, I was like, hey, let me just go through the book. We'll do it chapter by chapter. We'll see what dialogue's actually there and how it kind of plays out in a traditional sense, and then we'll begin to play with it. So I sort of started from a point of, let's just look at what's actually there. And then through that, it was a process of shifting it. Because like I sort of indicated at the start, it is incredibly long, but that's not to say that it's filled with inessential information. Everything in the book is actually incredibly important. And that was a bit of a surprise. When I was sort of working on it, I was like, oh, what do you cut? But yeah, and then from there, it became a process of play with everyone in the team to sort of find what is our take on this particular story. And a lot of that arrived out of conversations. But the how of it is complicated and quite spontaneous after a certain point, but I was ensuring that we had a base sort of primer, which was the original.
Can I yes and from that? Because it was a very collaborative process in kind of working out how we would tell this story. You know, what were all the plot beats? Because obviously the plot beats of a book play out very differently to the plot beats of a play. Particularly the second half of this book, which is, if you're familiar with it, is mostly letters, and our heroine actually doesn't do very much, and in dramatic terms that's tricky. So we sort of had to navigate that, and we also had to find a way to incorporate Austen's amazing dialogue, but make it so you'll find book lovers, you'll find a lot of Austen's dialogue there. But with some sort of with our own kind of sparkle that we kind of brought to it.
Well, exactly right, and that becomes, because once you start changing dialogue or the rhythms of it, you can have like a classic Austen line, which all of a sudden doesn't seem to work in the scene. You're like, oh, what have we done here? But yeah, we've sort of had to develop a particular form of Austenian language, which is at one time sort of contemporary, but then when those famous lines come out, it doesn't jar you out of the world. And that's just a sensibility shift. That's something you discover collaboratively with everyone within the process.
Yes. How about it? How do we go about it? Well, Neri, how do we train these group of actors to be amazing dancers?
We just made it a regular part of the process. So, like Will was explaining, we start our day with a check-in, and then we go into a movement rehearsal. There was a process beforehand, so I did a lot of research on my own and choreographed kind of in a studio before we had the cast in the room together. So that was, and then I kind of translated that onto them through the process. But then a lot of the dancers, that was probably actually only 3 of the 10
plus. And the rest kind of arrived on the floor. And so we were often running split rehearsal rooms. So one rehearsal room would be working on a particular scene and the dramaturgy of a scene, and then in another room I'd be running a choreographic rehearsal, and then we would kind of piece it together. So it was a very back and forth, but the movement has been kind of a consistent part of the process the whole time.
Amazing. Any other questions? I'm coming along here. Anyone? Yes. Friend in apricot shirt. Well, there's a two-phase question there in that, look at all these extra costumes we have to make. So Christina's getting started on that tonight. I'm kidding. No. Or what is fabulous about, do you want to speak to the costume and how we've managed to do that? Because there's a lot of costume changes. Then maybe yeah.
I can.
I'll answer the second part of that question.
Well, spoiler alert, there isn't a complete set of second costumes. Sorry, sad face. But actually, there's a concept behind the costuming which was partly to do with the fact that we had to start building it without the script, without the draft. We actually had to start because, Lewis and Wendy and I started at the same time. So without that roadmap, we were sort of very unsure about. Quite often when you've got a text, you can actually see, well, this person will become this character and they've got 3 pages to do it and things like that. We didn't have that map, so I just had to be ready for anything. So there's a premise behind the costuming that every performer has what I call a base costume, and then we add on top of that. So it actually allows us to do these horrifyingly quick changes that we talk about. It allows us to do that very easily. So what it's also allowed us to do is to give each of our covers their own base costume. So they will actually have their own base as well, and in a sense be ready to go on almost as anyone in whatever fits, whatever works, depending on how much notice we've got. There'll be things that we can do, but they're kind of already part of the world in a sense.
Yeah. There's some really interesting things about wardrobe on this show because it is a period romantic comedy. Do you want to give everyone a bit of an insight, Christine, into where, from the ends of the earth, have these costumes assembled? Because we have got a lot in here. And we've actually sourced from across Australia and actually the world.
Yeah, I actually counted them up the other day because people kept saying how many are there. And again, because of the base costume idea, it's a little hard to count them. I think there's 40 sort of complete looks that the cast of 12 wear as a complete sort of this is this character or this character. We've Nat Reiner, who's our head of costume, has sort of assembled this amazing team. I actually haven't worked there with such a large costume team before, and they've actually been fantastic. We've got this amazing tailor who came up to do all of our menswear, which was absolutely fantastic, Trish. But we couldn't make it all, and so we've had to put out calls to every other state theatre company. So we have costumes on stage from Sydney Theatre Company, Melbourne Theatre Company, State Theatre of South Australia. We have costumes from Opera Queensland. And of course, maybe you're talking about the Regency shop.
That's right. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Because Dan, I think, nearly fell over when he realised there is one shop in the world which is, it's called Darcy, if you can believe it. It's the name of the store. Darcy Clothing, and you can buy reproduction Regency wear, Regency and Victorian menswear. So our beautiful shirts, they come straight from Darcy. They use historical patterns. They use the right fabric. So yes, we often joke in costume that you can't just go out and buy a Regency costume, but you can, if it's a plain white shirt.
Yeah, that's right. And Darcy from the UK also supplies Bridgerton. That's correct.
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 I would imagine anyone doing a Regency or
Regency
Victorian
drama.
period would be buying, shirts, hose, some breeches. Yes.
All from Darcy's. The place to shop this summer. This Regency summer. Oh, yes, and the second part of the question, sorry, about covers. Oh, my gosh, Bridget, thank God you're here. Goodness. Yes, we do have covers, and increasingly do so have covers on our main stage season shows, because life happens, and we would rather be able to go on stage and give audiences the show, even if it does mean a cover has to swing in, and with sometimes 15 minutes notice. So it's it's something that we're really getting behind in the company. Another question, yes, here in the front row.
Never. We are one team, one dream. No, it's a great yes. There's no blood on the rehearsal room floor at all. No, it's been great. This is a huge show, and it's been a great advantage for this work to be able to, like Neri said, to run multiple rehearsal rooms, to kind of go, yep, to take different scenes, to swing in, to kind of go, yep, I've got a vision for that, or I've got a vision to support, to keep up the energy that's needed to not just run the rehearsal room, but also to collaborate in a fantastic design process, and to also collaborate on an adaptation process, to have two brains and two hearts working for that process has been really, really useful. Dan?
I agree. I think the best thing about Bridget is such an amazing theatre maker. She's also very deeply funny. And so I think the biggest danger in this work is have we gone too far with the comedy? Because we just yes and each other to the point where we go, pull back, it's too funny. Drama, it's a drama, isn't it? Is it drama?
But it's a romantic comedy.
It's a romantic comedy, and you're getting an insight into our process right now. Also, Bridget is a huge fan of the book, and sometimes I'll sit there and go, what's that part in chapter 4? They're going to Netherfield, and Bridget will go, page 7, line 3. She talks about this, and I go, aficionado. She is incredible. And so she's been the real purest barometer to go, you can't cut this. And I go, why can't they kiss already? And Bridget's like, they can't kiss. Not till chapter 25. Which has been lovely. It's been a really, really lovely process. And I love working with other people. It gets a bit lonely otherwise, doesn't it?
Yeah, directing can be so lonely, so it's so much better to do it with more than one person. And it's been so collaborative. Like the hierarchical process of running a room, that's kind of not for us, not for at all. And it's been lots and lots of voices in the room, which has been really, really fruitful, I think.
We have time for a couple more questions. Anyone? Yes, up there. Are there any? Ooh, the question is, are there any feelers for this production to go anywhere else?
Yeah.
We're going to Broadway. Wouldn't that be great? Not as yet, but perhaps. We'll see how it goes. I can tell you, can I tell you? I'm looking at the CEO in the back row, but I'm just going to say it. This show is selling incredibly well. In fact, we're on track to sell out before we even begin our first preview, which is an incredible, incredible achievement. Brisbane audiences have just gotten behind this in such a major way that we have just had the most astounding response. So these 12 people will be paying to a packed house every single night. So all the way up to the rafters, which is awesome. So I think at last count there was maybe like about 100 or something seats left. So if you know anyone wants to see it, please leave this venue immediately and go, you must book. Last question. Anyway, I've got a last question I really want to ask. Yes, that handful up. Oh, it's another second question. And the final question of tonight is, does Mr. Darcy get wet?
No
Go on,
response.
Andrew.
But you all will.
We've broken Sophia! We've broken Sophia! Andrew, how much would you like to reveal about that moment?
I'm a man of little words, like my character. Look, I'm still pushing for it. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe closing night.
There is a homage to that moment from the BBC series. Get ready. Keep your eyes peeled. Woo! Amazing. Okay, on that note, I think it is time. I think on that note, before it gets too after dark, we are going to draw the Lucky Door prize. Here it comes. Oh, I'll go and grab this. Okay. Thank you, James. I might get... Who wants to draw this? There's two. Maddie Burridge. Do you want to hold this? Okay. So I'll let you know the prize. It is a QT hamper filled with lots of beautiful artisanal condiments and wine. And there's also a double pass to the Dead Puppet Society production of Peter and the Starcatcher, which is a beautiful riff on the Peter Pan story that's in this theatre once we close Pride and Prejudice. The first winner of the Lucky Door prize is... Oh, wait, hang on. Drum roll.
Orange B56.
Do we have a winner? Orange B56. Otherwise, we'll redraw. We can redraw. Oh, wait, is that someone at the back there? Orange B56? Oh, well, there we go. You can come and collect your prize from James over here. And now this is the second one. It's another hamper. Ready, Perry? It's like dance training. Look at that.
Orange B65.
Orange B65, your hamper is ready. Who is Orange B65? Whoa, yeah! You can see James over here. So now, before we finish tonight, I just want to let you know that if you... Oh, thank you. I must stay. Please do let your friends or family know if they are still to book tickets, because we are going to sell out. Season tickets for the 25 season are still available. We have 8, 6, 5 and 3 play packages to choose from. So if you want to see more shows this year, single tickets can also be upgraded to a season package. You can contact our very friendly ticketing team to find out more. This play is the beginning of our 2025 season. It's an 8-play love affair that will take you from the shades of Pemberley to gritty courtrooms of hard-to-handle truths. We're off to Wild West saloons and broke-down palaces like Austen, care of Wendy and Lewis. This is a season of storytellers. Amongst them, I count our incredible performers and writers, directors, shout out to you, Richard Boyle, actors, designers, but also our milliners, our carpenters, our props makers, each of whom are all in service and celebration of story. We have the best artists in Queensland. These are all Queensland artists on this stage, and we do it all for you. So thank you, our dear audience, for joining us again for season 2025. We hope to see you in the theatre real soon. Safe travels home. Thank you, Sophia. I'm Jen Evans. Good night. Woo! Thanks, everyone. See you at Pride and Prejudice.